Bob,
yeah.
I'd mention on my board, I've got a representative of a 2-year, Jonathan Parent at Hopkinsville, and I believe she's in the audience tonight, Dory Combs, who is a professor at EKU, Dory, that's on the Kentucky Board of Education. So having, they know the reality, so we can't pull anything over their eyes. You know, they know the reality in 2-year and 4-year when we start talking about the collaboration of what we need to do.
Well, let me kind of advance this a little bit. As we began our planning early on, and this implementation plan was being developed, and I would be remiss if I didn't point out Sue Kane, who a number of you have met, but Sue has been kind of at the core of this from the very beginning. Early on, remember Senate Bill 1 actually was passed before the large national announcement about trying to proceed with the Common Core standards. And when that announcement was made, it became obvious that rather than trying to develop our own standards, that we ought to take a serious look at what was going on through this national effort. And because of a wonderful relationship we've had with Gene Wilhoit, who was at the center of the storm at that point at the Council of Chief State School Officers, we contacted Gene and we said, look, we've got this piece of legislation that we need to enact, and can you share with us the early drafts of what these standards are going to be? And Gene was willing to do that. And so Sue, who I've been fortunate enough to have on my staff, organized well over 100 collegiate faculty from our various campuses to actually review and comment on the standards. And what we discovered was a lot of the comments that we offered, and there were other states and universities were doing the same, but a lot of the comments that our faculty were offering were actually being absorbed into what became the final standards. As a consequence, those 100-plus faculty were able to give a credibility to this, at least in the higher ed community, so that our faculty felt some ownership and had a confidence that if students could demonstrate that they could perform and demonstrate that they understood the materials that were reflected in these standards, that we would be very comfortable admitting them without need of remediation. And so that was really, really important. But while that was going on, Terry and I and Phil one day said, you know, these legislators are really wonderful folks and they passed a great piece of legislation, but there ain't no money in it. You know, that stuff that you need to actually cause things to happen. And so we forged this conspiratorial agreement that we would create a legislative advisory committee and invited we went to the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate and said, would you appoint one of your members to this legislative advisory body that could work with us, and so we could share with you what we were doing and what our real motivation was, which was disclosed at the very first meeting, was to see if we could get them to find some money to help us do the things that we needed to do. So what was of particular interest to me is the Speaker appointed Carl Rollins, the chair of the Education Committee, which made enormous sense, and the President of the Senate appointed the President of the Senate, which was rather surprising. Now, in clear understanding, the President of the Senate has had a long-standing interest in education. And so we had the first meeting, and in walks President Williams. And Carl was there, and Terry and Phil and I and a couple of our staff members, and I think the budget director. And so we started taking them through, and I kind of casually mentioned, you know, there's no money. And to his great credit, President Williams said, well, let's get some additional members who are the chairs of the various finance and budget committees in the two houses and expand this committee, and then you guys come and tell us what you need. And so I'm interested, legislators, in after you learned what we needed, We were pretty explicit about it. In a year when everything else in the budget was being cut, this is 2 years ago. We do a biennial budget in this state. You guys found us some money. How'd you do it, if you remember?
There was nothing going on in Frankfurt at the time, so we just had to have something to do. So, no, in reality, there was nothing in Kentucky going on at that time as important that we saw as implementing Senate Bill 1, and certainly you turn over rocks long enough, you might find something.
And that's true. We realized how important it was. It was good that we had those meetings, and when we did, we found the money.
Well, the money was about, over the 2-year period, about $6 million that came to, essentially, to our office. But it was that money that was then utilized to do a number of things, which I hope you'll hear about in greater detail. But it included, first of all, building materials that could be shared with collegiate faculty. And we were interested in the following groups of faculty. We wanted faculty teaching entry-level courses. We wanted faculty who were training teachers, aspiring teachers. And we wanted teachers or faculty who were delivering developmental ed programs. We needed them, in our view, to understand these new Common Core standards, what the new assessment tools would be, and so Jillian and John and Sue and some other folks in our office working in Aaron's shop from scratch essentially built a series of activities and materials to train those cohorts of our collegiate faculty. By the end of last summer, we had trained, and teachers were coming to this voluntarily, over 3,000 college faculty. Getting college faculty to do anything outside of their normal routine is not easy, as most of you in higher ed know, but they did. And then beyond that, to start to build the professional development materials that would be able to supplement the PD that was going on through K-12. And while the amount of money was not huge, it actually stimulated campuses on their own, contributing people and some of their own dollars to allow these things to happen at a much greater scale than I think we could have imagined. And so it was quite astonishing, I thought. And we had conspired for months about how do we ask for the money and what do we tell them we need and all this stuff. And we were just incredibly thrilled that you were able to do it in what we know was a tough budget year. Terry, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I would say that our development of similar initiatives with professional development online, I think one of our key partners, I just saw her back there, KET. We've got one of the top educational television programs in the nation, and KET was so instrumental in developing videos for teachers and parents and community members around what Senate Bill 1 meant and the implementation. And I think in a couple of weeks we've launched a statewide initiative called Operation Preparation, where every 8th grader and 10th grader in school districts will have advisors to walk them through, community volunteers to walk them through, and KT was instrumental in providing training videos for that. I just completed mine today, so I'm ready. I'm ready.
Well, I'm looking at my watch and I see we've gone over our time a little bit, but I wanted to just offer 2 other points and then we'll stop. The first was that Kentucky, along with many other states in the country, applied for a Race to the Top grant. And we didn't get one of the initial grants, and we were enormously disappointed, obviously.
We didn't get the second round either.
Yeah, well. But what we found, and Commissioner, I'm going to ask you to elaborate on this, is that the effort of preparing the application actually added to the cohesiveness and the sense of collaboration that really has been the hallmark of these efforts. And Commissioner, I'll let you kind of describe how this team was put together and who participated when you all went to Washington. How'd that go?
Yeah, it was a great team. We had a local superintendent. We had Aaron there representing higher ed, and we had our Kentucky Education Association executive director. So I think teacher involvement in implementing Senate Bill 1 and has been instrumental from the very beginning. But we were that plan that we developed has been our roadmap for implementing Senate Bill 1. We have not deviated from that plan from race to the top. We've just enhanced it. And we did finally get some dollars in the third round, and those dollars are providing the state-of-the-art tool for our teachers. Standards online 24/7, deconstructed standards online, professional development aligned to the standards, formative assessments for Senator Justice Kelly for helping teachers improve instruction every day in every classroom with formative assessments, and the teacher evaluation effectiveness tool, and linking it to school and district improvement plans. That tool will drive this for the next 4 years, and it's a tool that I don't think any state has, but we certainly be happy to share the infrastructure for that tool and how we've developed that tool that Kentucky teachers are beginning to use as of a couple of weeks ago. So,
Phil, you want to add something?
Just to complete a thought that I started about 15 minutes ago.
All right.
That it happens. It happens. I started talking about CAPE a while ago, and I never finished my thought because there is a news article that's been released. It's embargoed right now, but because I have total disregard for that kind of thing, I am going to announce, because it fits so well to what we're talking about, our commissioner has been appointed to the Commission on Standards and Performance Reporting that CAPE is putting together to develop new performance standards, more rigorous, more clinical, related to the core content standards, and he's going to be representing K-12 on this Commission for Reporting Standards with the new CAPE group, and I think that deserves a round of applause because that's going to be very important. Well, and that's the kind of collaboration, because when he sits down at the table beside me, he says, I know I'm on this group, but I'm going to need you to help me. And that's exactly what we'll do. We'll work together, and he'll represent us, but we will be feeding him information, Bob, and he'll take it because he'll say anything we tell him to. Yeah.
Excellent. No problem. Well, let me conclude this with one other set of observations, and this is really directed at our higher ed colleagues. I have felt for a long time that this tension that has existed between K-12 and higher ed, where we're all pointing fingers at each other and blaming the other for whatever failures we perceive, number one, doesn't work. It's not a very productive engagement, obviously. And what I started doing in our office is when we talk about graduation rates, which is a moderately important metric for higher ed people, what I've started doing, and somebody in my shop actually dreamed this up, but when we show graduation rates now, we disaggregate them between those students who enter the universities or the community colleges prepared, ready to take credit-generating courses, and those who enter underprepared. And what we see, particularly at the baccalaureate level, in 5- and 6-year graduation rates, is that students who enter prepared are graduating at twice the rate of the students who are entering underprepared. And when I use this in speeches I make and getting around the state and stuff, it is striking. It's also striking for my campus presidents and our provosts. And in describing our graduation activities this way, I think I've been able to successfully make the case that it's in our business interest in higher ed, because we're going to be evaluated on how successful we are getting people not in the front door but out the back door with a degree, that we need to do everything we can to help K-12 be successful. And so our strategic plan for higher ed has 4 pieces. The first piece is all about how we can use our resources to help K-12. And not surprisingly, a great deal of it is all involved with teacher preparation and the things we can do to improve the quality of the teachers that we're sending Terry to hire and Phil to license and certify. And in this spirit, one of the things that I'm most pleased about is my presidents meet monthly. And from time to time, I have my commissioner of K-12 coming in and sitting down and talking right across the table with our presidents. And on a number of occasions, we've actually brought provosts and deans, arts and sciences deans, engineering deans, our ed school deans, to come to the table and talk with the commissioner and talk with Phil so that there is an exchange of information firsthand about what he needs to help him do his job, because the better he's able to do his, the better we can do ours. And so for those of you that, and I've heard this repeatedly just in the little bit of time I've spent here, but at some of the other national conferences, this notion of working together between higher ed and K-12 is such a foreign concept. We've got to get over it. And I can tell you, when you do, enormously powerful things can happen. And so with that, I'm going to thank all of you for you two guys for your foresight and wisdom in getting us this great piece of legislation, and for my 2 co-conspirators over there for all the great work.